against ISIS?
ISIS's main goal is to start a global war, which they will win, and then they'll create a fully Muslim world.
ISIS is an acronym for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. It was founded in 1999.
Due to ISIS' plan to spread hatred and fear and to cause a global war, we have came to a conclusion that for our political policy principles, we will maximize our security and minimize democratic equality. By doing that, we're not going to target the Muslims. We're going to target all of our citizens, so we are not infringing or violating their constitutional rights.
The French need to up their security because of the threat of terrorism, but what they don't need to be doing is stereotyping Arabs to be terrorists. This is because they will overlook someone who is a terrorist who might look like a Caucasian. Upping security won't fix the problem though, so France needs to continue their search for ISIS in Syria.
ISIS took control of Mosul, Iraq, and now rule an area larger than the United Kingdom. It controls territories estimated around 30,000 square miles. ISIS is the richest terror organization on earth. ISIS is responsible for the killings of women and children, and they are usually religiously motivated, killing Christians and Jews. They don't just target Christians and Jews, but those are their most known killings. They are sex traffickers, and they use chemical weapons and so much more. They try to convert people to Muslim, and they're definitely against the Western Hemisphere.
ISIS did have support from Al-Qaeda, but their actions have been so radical that Al-Qaeda withdrew their support from ISIS.
I just want to point out that the members of ISIS are Muslim extremists who interpret the Quran differently than most Muslim followers.
We chose to maximize security and minimize democratic equality. We are maximizing security because we want to increase the monitorization in Syria, to single out any threats. We chose to monitor Syria because that is their known training grounds. Also, they have claimed Syria as their own.
By doing this, we're helping France because the DGSE, the Direct General for External Security, highlights credible threats. It doesn't just give everyone. It points out specific people who are going from Syria to other places and will minimize terror and maximize peace in France.
France has a long history of representing peace and being a positive influence on global issues, with one of their most recent peacemaker projects is getting the Israelis and Palestinians to come to an agreement so that they can be in the same place. And that is being done with the help of Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault, which, according to the Times of Israel and Global Road Warrior. Which brings me to my next point with this issue that we got. Is war justified by France? ISIS' goal is to spread hate, fear, and global war so they could make the world how they see their ideology. And that information comes from the article What ISIS Really Wants by The Atlantic magazine. With the recent attacks in France, we have decided to strengthen our security by calling for a state of emergency, which will minimize democratic equality. France is all about freedom, equality, and justice. We will have border control at all entry points in France, increased security checks, random identity checks, being that France law requires you to carry a photo ID, according to smarttravel.gov. The security threat will be raised to high, which will give us the permission to call for that state of emergency. With the state of emergency, we are going to do all the basic stuff, but we plan to take it to the extreme, being that we are not going to help ISIS spread fear and hate into our loyal citizens. I think I have made it clear that we will not tolerate any group spreading hate amongst our citizens. We will not single out anyone until suspicious activity occurs, and we will be using France's external intelligence agency. We are going to closely monitor those who are traveling out of the country to Syria and areas surrounding Syria, being that ISIS has claimed Greater Syria as an Islamic state, and Iraq to mention, coming from infoweb.newsbank.com, and that is, if this plan fails, that will leave us no other option but to go to war with ISIS. Going to war with ISIS would mean we'll put our military troops on their grounds in Syria, which I know that would be giving ISIS what they really want, but France is a part of the United Nations and Group of 8, but for short times we're going to call it the G8. According to Global World War, the United Nations job is to keep international peace and security, which ISIS is a global issue. So this is obviously something that the UN would be aiding France with. We are not afraid of ISIS, and we are going to take every precaution as necessary to protect our citizens.
According to Article 5 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, two principles in the Just War Doctrine, Law 2309, states, all means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective, and there must be serious prospects of success. Therefore, we decided to maximize the principle presumption of peace and minimize the principle effectiveness. Since presumption of peace is France's policy, an offensive war against ISIS is only justified if it was the last resort. First, France must stop influencing ISIS's propaganda, which appears through social media. Also, France needs to make an embargo agreement with the United States, Russia, China, Balkans, and Iran on weapons in order to reduce the amount of effective weapons ISIS attains. In addition, France should dissolve conflicts within France, particularly conflicts that revolve around religious issues. This could be done by regularly viewing polls that demonstrate the citizens' feelings on democratic equality in France. This information should help the French government improve equality in France, which in return will weaken ISIS's ability to recruit French citizens. We decided to minimize the principal effectiveness because even though war is justified in terms of presumption of peace, an offensive war can be ineffective. In this event, war is ineffective because ISIS is an unorganized state whose one-time attack on France is not a legitimate reason to engage in warfare, and as a result, France will not be successful.
Covering our religious and political policy statements, as a group we have came to the conclusion that we are having conflict between France's government and the Muslims. The conflict occurs when France's government discriminates against the Muslims, when freedom of religion is a French law known as laïcité. The Prime Minister Emmanuel Valls of France said that Muslims wearing should be covered at university, and by him saying that, denying a religious covering is denying religious freedom, which is breaking the law laïcité. It has become a problem for Muslims to express their religion through their coverings, because when people know that they are Muslims, they are being thought as or seen as violent or associated with terrorism. Europe has the largest population of Muslims, and France is failing to treat Islam equally and fairly as they do any other religious group. Islam as a religious group is having the most problems with the French government, being that Muslims are getting blamed for terrorist attack that they have associated with, and by the French government acknowledging the religion in such a negative aspect, an increasing number of French non-Muslim citizens are demonstrating lack of respect for the Muslim culture and free will. Now, by French government not acknowledging the religion in a positive light, this is infringing on the Muslim basic individuals' rights, And by infringing on basic individual rights, it is dividing our country at a time when we need to be unifying all of our people when we are fighting the same fight against ISIS. It has now become a mindset of the government and the French non-Muslim people, of us being the French government and the non-Muslim people versus them being the French citizen, the French Muslim citizens. And in order for us to not feed into ISIS ideology, and in order for us to weaken ISIS at home, we need not to do that. And this is the time that French should treat the Muslims equally and not blame the religion for terrorist attacks. And because by doing this, this will only be the beginning of ISIS training in our backyard. And I quote from a video on YouTube that I found through the library database that a member of ISIS said that you have chosen your side and now we have chosen ours. So now I feel like although terrorism has no religion, we're discriminating against the Muslims and we're making them feel like outsiders when they are French citizens. And by doing that, we are choosing our side to not treat them as loyal French citizens, and we are infringing on their rights and not letting them represent their freedom of religion. So this could be a huge problem of ISIS spreading and recruiting in our own backyard.